Welcome to this week's edition of Across Africa. And it's a special one, and it's my pleasure to say that I will be speaking to the head of the World Trade Organization as my special guest, Nigeria's former finance minister, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Doctor, thanks so much for making the time to squeeze us in.
Thank you, Georgia.
First of all, the World Trade Organization, for those of us who aren't economists, just briefly lay out why trade is so important to the continent and its prospects.
Well, first of all, the World Trade Organization is that organization that makes sure that countries within the world can trade with each other according to stable rules, fair and open, predictable rules. This is very important because if you can just do what you like in trade, it means that if I'm a trader sending goods to your country, you can charge me whatever customs duties or import duties that you like when my goods arrive, and that could make it more expensive for people in that country to buy it, and vice versa. With the World Trade Organization's countries that are members agree beforehand that here are these are the duties, or we call them tariffs, we are going to charge when goods arrive in our different countries. And we keep these stable and fair so that traders, business people who export know what to expect at the other end. Those who import know what to expect when the goods arrive. The World Trade Organization makes it run, and people don't notice because when things are going really smoothly, you don't notice, do you?
But
that's
is it going smoothly? Because, there have been some criticisms suggesting that Africa has a bit of an asymmetrical relationship with richer regions or blocks in terms of the way that the WTO operates. Would you say that was fair?
Well, first of all, let me say two things. You said, is it going smoothly? At this point in time, we're seeing more protectionism. That is, certain countries feeling that they want to, making it a little less easier for goods to access their markets. And therefore, others responding by also doing the same. We call that protectionism, when you're raising the duties and the tariffs. And that is not something we want to see. Like I said, the WTO's role is to make sure that tariffs are predictable, that traders know what to expect. So that's not something we want, and certainly for Africa. Then second, you said WTO rules, this asymmetry, that it favors maybe more rich countries than poorer countries in Africa. First, it is true that Africa's trade with the world has remained stagnant over time. 3% or less of global trade is Africa's trade with the rest of the world has been about 3% or less for many, many years. And that's not good enough, okay? But is it because of WTO rules, or is there something else going on there that we need to think about? As an African, I have to tell you straightforwardly that in order to trade more with other countries, or even with yourselves within the continent, you need to add value to your products. If you keep exporting the same things you've been exporting for decades, primary commodities that are very subject to price volatility in the world, you're not going to capture a larger share of the market. Africa must add value to its products on the continent. Africa's trade with itself, intra-Africa trade, is anywhere from 15 to 20%, depending on whose figures you're looking at. That also is not good enough. And that has also been stagnant over time. So,
do you expect that the African Continental Free Trade Area is going to change that substantially in any kind of foreseeable future?
Absolutely, I think so. I think the African Continental Free Trade Area is one of the best things the continent has done. It will take time to yield the benefits, but when you have a market of 1.4 billion people, that is saying a lot. So now what do we have to do to take advantage of that African Continental Free Trade Area and the WTO's rules? We must insist that everything we produce, we have to add value to it, process it on the continent. Africa must industrialize more. We must do more manufacturing. We make coffee, transform it. Critical minerals are becoming very important. All these rare earths, lithium.
Yeah, we saw that at summit in South Korea.
Yeah,
They're clearly aware of the potential.
Clearly aware that, you know, this time around, Africa must not miss the opportunity by just allowing people to extract the raw material and send it. No. What we are saying now at the WTO, which is very supportive of what we want to see on the continent, is you have to invest. You have to process if it's lithium there. You have to establish the factories that make the batteries that ultimately use the product. And several countries can be involved in this, so you have a supply chain created. That will create more jobs for our young people. And then when we export that finished product, we're going to make so much more money, and our share of world trade will increase.
So why isn't this happening already? What would you like to see members on the African continent doing more of in order to prepare themselves to take advantage of these opportunities that you just set out?
We have to make ourselves more investment friendly, meaning we need to sweep away the bureaucracy in the way of investment. One. Two, we need better infrastructure. Part of the reason why it's difficult to produce on the continent is we still have 55% of people on the continent with no access to energy or power. So we must assure constant power, electricity. Many countries are now building industrial parks to accommodate those who want to set up manufacturing plants. We must make sure we don't ask them to take as many licenses just to invest in our country as possible. I'm not saying everything should be free and open, but let's not put too much bureaucracy and therefore also give a chance for people to ask for something under the table. All that should be swept away so that an investor can come in, really put in money, invest, create the jobs. We add value to the products and we can export. These are the things stopping us. So we need investment, one, to help us with infrastructure. And actually now we have a beautiful chance because everyone wants to go green. They're looking for green energy, green hydrogen, and many countries on the continent have the potential to produce green hydrogen. We should use some of it for ourselves in order to provide power for our industry and our people, and the rest we can export. But let's produce clean energy. You know, we have a chance to do that in so many countries.
So that's going to take a huge amount of capacity building. Doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. But also, what about the continent's human resources? I mean, on a continent where the vast majority of entrepreneurs are women, what can the WTO do? Or what's your take on what Africa itself can do to make more of this resource, this entrepreneurial drive that we're already seeing evidence, but a lot in the grey market and the black market, and therefore untapped?
You're right. The one thing we do possess on the continent, which we don't lack, is entrepreneurial drive and spirit. And among our youth, I'm so amazed. That's what gives me a lot of hope. They're so entrepreneurial and they're with it. A lot of them are trading digitally, and digital trade is the wave of the future. So it's not really about capacity building so much as it is about making the cost of investing in the continent lower. You know, sometimes investing in Africa is like adding another 300% plus tariff on your goods. It's too costly. So I'm convinced that the time we can put proper infrastructure, as we put more infrastructure into place and we sweep away the barriers, we will have more investment. And the young people, you said, yes, human capital is important and we must train them. But right now we have trained people that can be employed. So let us do what we need to do. On the other side, it's also not Africa's fault that many investors feel the continent is a risky place to invest. And I think that is exaggerated, okay? The risk premium that outside investors want or think they need in order to invest on the continent is too high. So we need to do everything to convince them that thing is perception, not fact. That actually when you invest on the continent, the returns can be quite high. Returns up to 30% rate of return on an investment. You can't get that easily. You know, so let us do what we need to do in cutting down the cost of investment and making it easier. Let us communicate that. And I want to say, Georgia, that here at the WTO, we have an agreement called the Investment Facilitation Agreement that is being negotiated, or actually we're almost completing the negotiation, that will help sweep away the barriers for all the countries. And I'm very proud to say that most African countries have signed onto it. So once it becomes effective, that will also show investors that Africans mean business and that they don't have to wait for it to be said. They can see when you sign on to this agreement, you're saying, I will make sure you don't have to get licenses for every single thing you want to do, except for the very necessary ones. And I will make it easier for you to do business.
And finally, when you say Africans mean business, there is an African who means more business than you, former Nigerian finance minister, now head of the WTO, and also the first female head of the WTO. Do you think that has brought any new perspective to the role?
Well, you know, in order to get a true perspective, you have to ask my members, because they are the ones who can tell you what they feel, whether my presence has made a difference. But here's what I think. Being here as someone who is African and from a developing country, I have a heightened perception of what doesn't work for African countries within our rules. For example, the agricultural agreement. You know that agriculture is so important for our countries. We need a breakthrough we are negotiating an agricultural agreement here, and it's not going as fast as we want. But we need to finish it because it will enable us to put away those things that are stopping some African countries from being competitive in agriculture. When other countries are giving subsidies to their products that we are also producing and we don't have the money to give the subsidies, that means we cannot compete. So I'm here, I can see that, you know, and working to make sure we get a breakthrough. So there's a heightened perception of what does the continent need, what is it at the WTO that is not working for us that we can make better, and what more do we need to do. And I'm proud to say there are one or two things, Georgia, we are actually doing now. One, for the cotton producing countries who are experiencing stress in competing because of subsidies elsewhere, we have managed to get an alliance with FIFA, the Football Federation, with UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Organization, ourselves, Afrexim Bank, to come together to help those cotton countries to add value to the cotton in place on the continent. No more exporting this. You produce, turn it into textiles, which will create more jobs, and sports apparel. The sports apparel market, of which FIFA is a big member, is worth over $260 billion. If African countries can capture even 10 billion of that, isn't that doing something?
That's
so
amazing.
we're working in a partnership with them now to clear the way to us being able to grab a piece of that market. And that's happening here at the WTO.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Ngozi. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you. Thank you as well for joining us for this special edition of Across Africa. Do so again if you can. Till then, take care.